Sagan to craft the message.
Carl Sagan was one of the most active astronomers in the search for life outside our planet. He was a very prominent scientist, he was an excellent astronomer, and he really did a lot to help us understand how we might contact other life or detect life elsewhere in the universe.
Sagan, along with SETI founder Frank Drake, designed a gold anodized aluminum plaque measuring roughly 6 by 9 inches that contained a collection of symbolic images representing humans and Earth.
The man and the woman were nude, and the gentleman was holding one arm up like this in what was intended to be a sign of greeting.
A schematic design of the solar system was also shown, with the planned trajectory of the Pioneer spacecraft marked on it, and a diagram of 14 pulsar stars around the Sun made a chart that might help someone work out where the craft originated.
We tried to give them an idea of where we're located. And that's an interesting problem, is to figure out how you would tell someone where you're located in space, because you don't know where they're going to find it. And it was all in a very stylistic design, but in an attempt to hopefully communicate at least some of these ideas.
5 years later, in 1977, Dr. Sagan got a second chance at designing an interstellar message when NASA agreed to attach another one to the Voyager's music from around the world. One interesting song selection was Chuck Berry's rock and roll hit, Johnny Be Good.
Music is a good choice because almost anything vibrates and makes sound. So I would have bet that almost any culture would develop music. I believe it's Bach who gets the most time on the record. I don't know why they picked that, to be honest, but he is one of the more mathematical composers, and that may have been one of the reasons, because math is a more universal language.
Sagan also included a wide array of photographs of well-known man-made structures and greetings in 55 different languages.
I think the most important one is the Sumerian language. Now, why would they include Sumerian on that record? Well, according to the ancient alien theory, ancient Sumeria is the first place where we made contact with an extraterrestrial entity.
At this point, we obviously haven't learned anything yet about extraterrestrial life because we haven't been contacted back. But I think for our own purposes, anytime you try and go and figure out how you want to communicate something, it pushes your boundaries and understanding of communication itself.
We all want to find aliens, whether it's the planetary scientists looking for signs of life on another distant planet, whether it's the ancient alien proponents who want to find signs of life of aliens who have visited in the past, and whether it's people today who want to have experiences with UFOs and aliens that have visited them recently. All of us are trying to do the same thing.
While the search for extraterrestrial beings continues, a new space-based telescope is hunting for planets that may contain life. Are there other Earths out there? And if so, how will we find them? On March 6, 2009, NASA launched a Delta II rocket into space. On board was a new telescope, named in honor of German astronomer Johann Kepler. The space-based telescope was designed specifically to discover the existence of Earth-like planets located outside our own solar system. The Kepler search is focused on a specific section of the Milky Way, known as Orion's Spur.
Kepler's job is to answer the question, how common are other Earths? And to do this, Kepler is looking at one part of the sky for 3.5 years. Imagine like keeping your eyes open and staring at just one part of the sky.
And what they're doing is they're looking at stars, and then as a planet goes around that star, when the planet gets in front of the starlight dims just a little bit from our vantage point because it's being blocked by the planet. And so you look for that dimming of those stars, and then that's how you're able to detect these planets.
So far, the Kepler telescope has confirmed the existence of 5 planets outside our own solar system. NASA officials expect to find several hundred more exoplanets like these before their mission is completed. Once a planet has been located, scientists must then determine if it might contain water.
We know from Earth that all life on Earth requires liquid water. So that is the approach that we've been taking for looking for life elsewhere in the universe. Follow the water. And so that is the step one.
On Earth, wherever we find liquid water, we find life. And it's true. Life on Earth can exist under an extraordinary range of conditions. Extreme organisms that live in the scalding effluent coming out of the Earth's crust deep beneath the ocean. There are other remarkable organisms living in the waste pools of nuclear reactors in extreme radiation environments and so on. But the one thing that seems to be absolutely necessary for life as we know it is liquid water.
To determine if a planet contains water and possibly life, scientists use special telescopes to analyze its atmosphere.
We look at the light coming from the planet, and we split that light up, like a rainbow. Now, if you look at a rainbow in the sky and you look really, really carefully, you will see some dark lines. You'll see some colors missing from the rainbow. And those colors are missing because of absorption by gases in Earth's atmosphere. So effectively, we're getting a rainbow from another planet, and we're looking for dark lines that tell us what kind of gases are in the atmosphere.
To better understand how life affects its atmosphere, NASA scientists study microbial mats at California's Moss Landing Wildlife Area.
Microbial mats are important to NASA for a whole bunch of reasons. The organisms that are in microbial mats have been on Earth just about longer than any other kind of organism. They make a number of things which we call biomarkers, which are important in our search for life on other planets. So there are textural biomarkers, so when you pull up a piece of microbial mat and look at the surface, what does that look like? One of the things that we're doing with these microbial mats is we're measuring the fluxes of methane. Methane is a gas that's produced by certain kinds of organisms that use the organic matter that's in these mats. And when that methane goes into our atmosphere, it can be detected by other missions, such as Terrestrial Planet Finder is one of NASA's concept missions for looking for gases that are produced by life on exoplanets.
We can look for the signature of oxygen or water on a planet, and at least that would give us an idea of life forms like ourselves, the ones that are
Zone or not.
In recent years, it's been recognized that there's more than one Goldilocks zone. For example, there could be life inside icy planetesimals, these like small planets or large moons. The moon of Jupiter, Europa, is a very good example. Europa is liquid beneath an ice cap. It's liquid underneath because of tidal heating and friction going on inside the planet. So it could be that there is life, microbial probably only, deep down under the ice on Europa.
It's a very challenging question if there's life elsewhere in our solar system. You have so many components that have to come together. We have to have an understanding of the science. We have to ask the right questions. I wish I had a tricorder that I could just go and point and would say life or no life, right? But we don't have that. So we have to be smart and we have to be clever and we have to develop instruments that can actually address the questions we're trying to answer.
It's inevitable. There's so many planets out there, it's inevitable that we'll find one in the Goldilocks zone any day.
But while the Kepler telescope has only just begun scanning the horizon, NASA is already planning the next step in its search for extraterrestrial life: the 2014 launch of the James Webb Space Telescope.
People always ask me, do you expect to find an Earth in your lifetime? And I say, yes, absolutely.
When I was a student, there was almost nobody prepared to argue that way. The feeling back in the 60s and 70s was that even if there were other Earth-like planets, life is such an improbable freak event that it would never ever happen anywhere else. Now the prevailing view is, yes, the universe is teeming with life.
Everybody wants to meet an alien. But we have to start small. We have to learn how to walk before we can run.
The fascinating thing for me is that we're only 4.5 billion years old in a universe that's close to 14 billion years old. What would happen with some of these Earth-like planets that had a 5 or 10 billion year head start on us?
Newspaper reports described families fleeing their homes for the mountains, while others armed themselves with weapons and prepared to fight off the alien invaders.
If it was just presented maybe with a brief introduction saying it was not really happening, but from then on it was played as if it was really happening, well, most people who heard that thought that it was really happening.
People became upset. Some of those literally headed for the hills. They drove places to try to pick up other people, family and friends. They reported to the armory for duty.
The response to this fictional alien attack resulted in many people preparing for the worst. But if the public's reaction to a radio dramatization resulted in a nationwide wave of terror, what would happen if they really came? Los Angeles, California. In the early months of 1942, the city was on edge. The recent surprise attack on Pearl Harbor had propelled America into World War II, and the threat of a Japanese invasion, by sea or by air, kept the military on full alert.
Pearl Harbor was a very recent memory for people. People were in high alert. There was a great deal of suspicion. Japanese Americans were being put in internment camps. There were German U-boats in the Atlantic, Japanese submarines in the Pacific, and people were very fearful.
In a well-organized defense operation, air raid wardens and the Coast Guard were monitoring the Pacific shoreline as never before.
The war had started. I was a 13-year-old kid, and this one night, which was February 1942, the sirens started wailing in the middle of the night. Blackout. And we'd had several blackouts before this.
On February 25th, between the hours of 3:12 and 4
July,
I started hearing a lot of loud explosions. My brother and I looked out the bedroom window, saw searchlights twisting and turning in the sky.
But what was the strange UFO that the searchlights were focused on? Where had it come from? Japan or somewhere from out of this world? Could this incredible photograph, published the next morning in the Los Angeles Times, provide the proof? Could ancient astronaut theorists have been right all along?
It was practically overhead, and I mean overhead.
Retired anthropology professor C. Scott Littleton was 9 years old and growing up in Hermosa Beach when he spotted the strange object hovering right over his house.
We saw what my mother always called a silver bug. I'd characterize it today as a lozenge, a long oval. It was something I'll never ever forget.